Alright guys, I'm waiting for my son to get out of his basketball game. Because of COVID, we're not allowed to go in, so I have a little bit of time, and I thought what better to do than to read a chapter from the Watsons. So this one's chapter 12, and it's called That Dog Don't Hunt No More. Birmingham was like an oven. The first night I couldn't sleep at all. Me and Vi had to share a bed, and we were both sweating like two pigs. It got so hot that Byron didn't even keep a sheet on himself to make sure I didn't accidentally touch him in the night. He finally slept on the floor because he said it was a little bit cooler. When I got up, Byron was gone. I looked out the window in the backyard, and Vi and Dad and Mr. Roberts were standing under a big tree with a dog. I went to the bathroom real quick, did my morning scratches, and then ran out to be with the guys. Morning, Kenny. Morning, Dad. Morning, Mr. Robert. Morning, Vi. Vi just grunted and then said, "Man, you gotta quit drinking so much water. You sweated up the whole bed last night. I ain't sharing a bed with your leaky little..." He looked at Dad. "With your leaky little self again?" Mr. Roberts said, "You boys will get used to that heat." Dad petted the dog and said, "He's too old to hunt?" "Oh yeah, that dog don't hunt no more. He's just like me, lost the desire. Both of us got to the point where we just couldn't pull the trigger. Both of us just gotta be like Joe Louis toward the end. Remember his last fights, Daniel? Remember how Joe just walked around the ring waving the left fist like a threat? He just couldn't throw it. He just couldn't pull the trigger no more. His mind told him to do it, but his body wouldn't cooperate. That's me and Toddy. There's times at night I hear him howl and I know he's dreaming about being in the woods, but both of us know that's gone." Mr. Robert bent down and rubbed the dog's head. "Yeah, son, in his day he was the best coon dog in all of Alabama. Used to get $100 just to stud him." Byron rubbed the old gray nasty looking dog's head. "Two? $100? Man! Yeah, me and Toddy saved each other's lives. Hate to see him getting so old. Judging by the way Mr. Robert looked, I bet the dog was saying the same thing about him." "How'd he save your life? You ever been coon hunting?" "No, sir." "Well, there ain't too many animals wilder or tougher than an old coon. Most people think you just chase 'em up a tree and pop 'em, but that ain't half the story. Toddy trailed this coon all the way to the lake, and the coon went into the water. Most of the time a dog will stop right at the water. They know better than to go in. But Toddy must have dove right in after that coon. He must have been a half a mile ahead of me when I heard him hollering and then get real quiet." "What happened?" "That coon got him in the water and held his head until he drowned him." I stopped believing this junk right there. A raccoon drowning a dog? I looked at Vi and Dad, but they were both believing what Mr. Robert was saying. Dad said, "I heard about raccoons doing that." "Oh yeah, Toddy's here living proof." Byron said, "If he drowned, how come he ain't dead?" "Well, when I finally got to the lake, I seen the coon going out one way and Toddy nowhere in sight. I knew what happened. I dove right in that water and started looking for him. Took me only a minute. I dragged him back to shore, turned him upside down to let the water run out of him. Held his mouth shut and breathed right into his nose. He kicked a couple times and then came to." Byron said, "Man, that's too much. That's cool." All I could think of was that Mr. Roberts was probably the only human being that I ever knew that put his mouth on a dog's nose. That was pretty cool. I asked Dad, "When do we eat?" "Kenny, you're the only one who hasn't eaten already. Your mother and grandmother are in the kitchen. Go on inside." I went back inside, and even before I could get in, I could hear Mama saying that Birmingham wasn't anything like she remembered. Her favorite saying's gotta be, "What's this? And how long's that been like that? And when did that happen? And why do you gotta do it like this? And most of all, aw, Mama." Grandma Sands thought Mama was hilarious and cracked up every time Mama got upset or worried about something that she didn't remember or didn't like. Grandma Sands must have seen The Wizard of Oz a million times, because every time she laughed, it sounded just like the Wicked Witch of the West. At first, her laugh was so scary that whenever me and Joey heard it, we wanted to go behind something or someone. But after a while, we got used to it. It took us even longer to get used to the southern style of talking. Man, Grandma Sands and Mama get yakking at each other, and we could only understand half the things that they said. The smell of bacon dragged me right into the kitchen, and Mama and Joey and Grandma Sands were sitting at a little skinny table, yakking. "Morning, Kenneth. Morning, Mama. Morning, Joey. Morning, Grandma Sands." "You sleep okay?" It was real hot. Joey was sitting in Mama's lap looking all drowsy. She said, "I know, I've been sweating all night." The bacon was sitting on a plate on a piece of paper towel. Mama had another piece of paper towel in her hands because all the things that Grandma Sands was telling her were making her hands all disgusting and sweaty. I got some cereal and some bread and some bacon and sat at the skinny table with him. I must have interrupted something really important because as soon as I sat down, Mama acted like I'd disappeared and started asking Grandma Sands more questions. "Well, what about Calla Lily Lincoln? I always wonder what she's doing." "Lona, didn't I write you about that?" They kept on talking and kept on oohing and ahhing, and Grandma Sands kept on interrupting breakfast by scaring me and Joey with that laugh. And Mama kept saying, "Oh, Mama," and she kept on having to get up and get more paper towels to wipe her hands. And most of all, she kept talking more and more Southern style. They talked about how much people were having trouble down here, and who got married to who, and how many kids this one had, and how many times that one was in jail, and a bunch of boring junk like that. It didn't get real interesting until I noticed Mama got real nervous right before she said, "And what about you, Mama? Mr. Roberts seems like a nice man." Grandma gave that laugh, and a spoon flew out of my hand and spilled cornflakes on the table. Mama acted like she didn't notice, but without even looking at me, she handed me one of those nasty soaking wet paper towels and kept looking at Grandma Sands. "I was wondering when we would get to that," Grandma Sands smiled. "We've been good friends since right after you left for Flint." Mama was being kind of rude. She interrupted and said, "Oh, Mama, good friends? What does that mean? Lona Sands, what is bothering you? Why don't you just say what's on your mind?" Mama started wringing the neck of another piece of paper towel. "I don't understand what's going on here. How come I never knew him? Did Daddy know him?" Mama said the last part like she was dropping a bomb on Grandma Sands. Grandma Sands looked at her for a minute. "Lona, things are different from what they were when you left. Nearly everything has changed. Your daddy's been gone for almost 20 years. Grandma Sands had stopped smiling. "Now, Mr. Roberts is my dearest friend." Well, I could see when Byron learned how to say a couple of words and have people think he said a whole bunch more. Grandma Sands didn't yell or scream or anything, but the way she said those couple of things made everybody who heard it shut their mouths and listen real hard. Even though she told only Mama Mr. Roberts was a friend, it seemed like I heard her also give my mother a real good scolding. Mama pouted and kissed the top of Joey's head. I picked up my spoon and kept eating. This was great. I'd never seen Mama act like a little kid who got yelled at, but there she was, picking a piece of paper towel and looking kind of embarrassed. Dad and Byron came in with Mr. Robert. "Mr. Robert's going to walk us to the lake, show us the best fishing spots for later. Joey, Kenny, you coming? Give these two some time to talk alone." Mama pushed Joey off her lap and we followed the little parade outside. The heat made me and Joey feel like we couldn't wake up. I didn't want to do any walking, but the dirty dogs made me go anyway. The only kid that acted like he was having fun was Byron. He walked the whole way with Mr. Robert and Dad and laughed and joked with them about every stupid story they told. When we finally got back inside, I went to sleep under a fan. They were going to have to force me to go fishing with Byron and Joey the next day, and I knew I needed a ton of rest. I started to think that making Byron spend all of this summer in the heat was more punishment than any juvenile delinquent like him deserved. But it seemed like he was having a real good time. All right, that's chapter 12.